Hi, everyone. You are watching The Self Connection with Ginny Brown and Kelly Pietro, where we have conversations with a group of ascended masters known as the multitude of the greater good.
The multitude is, as Kelly said, a group of ascended masters. They're healers and teachers and are interested in conveying their information to us on the earth plane to help us along our paths of being. Kelly asked the questions. I channel the answers from the higher beings, which is the multitude, plus other higher level energies as who come in as they are needed or may see fit. And that's how it works. Kelly asks, and the multitude answers. So thank you all for coming and watching.
And Ginny, thanks for being a clear channel. So,
Happy to be here.
so the topic tonight is a little dark, but it's in current news right now. So we're recording on May 15th here. And this week began the trials of P. Diddy, which I know, Ginny, is not your area of interest or even that you know much about him. Um,
Just don't like to follow it. I know a little bit about him. I know a little bit about what's going on, but I just don't like to actually get deep into it because it annoys me.
okay. So are you comfortable channeling questions about this?
It's not me, it's the multitude. We'll see what they have to say.
Okay. And I'm not going to get too deep into like who did what, because like that's all out there. I mean, some of it. I guess what I want to talk about is like some trends that I see around this happening, some narratives that are coming up as a result of this case. And so I'm just curious about like what else is at play. So let me just, I took some notes. So I'm just going to read my notes to kind of lay the foundation of where I want to go with this.
Okay.
Okay. So because I've been kind of following the case a little bit, of course, my algorithms kind of adjust, right? Based on if I'm interested in seeing the news about it or whatever. And it gives me more and more content on that subject matter. And so what I'm seeing is like a lot of what appears to be AI generated content. I think it's AI generated. But there's like this repetitive messaging. So the way this is why I think it's AI generated because the voices tend to be the same kind of inflection. They're pronouncing words wrong, so you can tell it's like a script.
Yeah.
The imagery is the same. It's just maybe it's a male voice in this video, a female voice. In other words, the story is all the same. And it's like there's this narrative that's shaping around this case, right? So there's repeat messaging that claims that he was fairly high up in a sex trafficking ring that has even more powerful players than himself. In other words, he has bosses to answer to, and that these bosses empowered him to be very well connected and enabled in order to provide all these fantasies to elite people in power, including heads of nations, royalty, and religious leaders around the world. Allegedly, that's what these videos allege.
Right.
Um, and these videos have this understory that this ring of power, which P. Diddy was very much a part of, allegedly, was that there was a lot of satanic ritual abuse, sex trafficking, human sacrificing minors, like really, really dark and disturbing things. So we've got that trending, right?
And this is for entertainment purposes only?
Yeah, we are not experts in this. I'm just observing what algorithms are producing, what other people, what content is being produced and alleging here. Well, we
Yeah.
don't know, we don't actually know.
No, we don't know anything really.
So now on the other side, because of some of the content that this produces, it's kind of like there's this general denouncing of paganism, right? And that there's this trending upwards, especially with conservative influencers professing Christianity and denouncing paganism, claiming that like paganism is equivalent to devil worshiping, right? And for those who don't know a lot about paganism, they're clumping in Diddy's supposed satanic practices with paganism, which anyone who knows, like paganism and Satanism is different. It's like totally different things. Um,
Exactly.
but it feels like there's this narrative being shaped to kind of shape the minds of people around this, right? So I'm seeing these two trends going on concurrently, and it's like there's so much content in these algorithms that it feels deliberate. And whether there's some sort of orchestration on the physical realm or the spiritual realm, like to me, that's very interesting to notice. And, I think most people can agree that satanic worship and human sacrificing are not virtuous, right? But but then when there's like this pinning next to Christianity, there seems to be on offer this obvious choice, right? So it seems to me that there's this danger in this narrative that conflates paganism with satanic worship and inherent evil acts that we mentioned earlier. And obviously that's not true, but I just find that this trending that's happening, it's mostly on YouTube, is very interesting. So my first question to the multitude is, what is this all about? Why are these themes playing out today? Is it just like a shadow that's coming up to be seen and healed? Is there something nefarious and intentional going on? Like, what is actually happening with these themes that are playing out right now in humanity?
It is important to understand that each one allows each one self to be who they are when they are. And if it is that they need to allow themselves to experience certain experiences, they allow themselves to experience those experiences on the earth plane in order to allow themselves to move forward in their own knowing, their own being, and their own allowing. In our estimation, it is important to understand that there are those things of competition, one might say, those things that conflict with each other. I'm also getting conflate because I'm not sure what the word is. But I think it's conflict with each other in order to allow one to understand more of who one is. And it's like making choices. When one understands what one wants, then one understands which way for them to follow their path. In our estimation, it is important to understand there are many things happening on the earth plane. That is just one of them. And each one has a purpose of being, and each one has a purpose of understanding that as one moves forward in one's own growth processes, one is confronted with many different options, and that's just one. There are those who are quite enthralled and quite engrossed in that particular genre of information and following that trial quite closely. However, there are others who are not interested and allow themselves the ability to be differently on the earth plane. We can tell you that if one is interested in allowing oneself to go one direction or another, there is a reason for the learning, the understanding, and the allowing of being. In our estimation, it is important to understand that as each one moves forward, each one learns, each one is, each one allows, and each one moves no matter what the direction. If it is that one chooses to allow oneself to believe the hypocrisy that is being, uh, it's like dismantled, distinguished, disinterested, uh, it's put out there, whatever that word is, distributed, distributed. If one allows oneself to understand that that information that is being distributed is allowing one to check in with oneself, to allow one to understand what one's own belief in the process is, and move oneself forward. Do not be concerned. When it is that one understands, it is there for one's choice of being and one's allowing of knowing. Then one is able to make a choice and allow oneself to follow that part of self that is interested in learning, interested in being, interested in allowing, and then moving forward from that vantage point. Do not be concerned, all is love.
I just want to check in with you, Ginny, before I ask more questions.
Go ahead and ask. No, that's,
Huh?
go ahead and ask.
I
It's the
know. You're good?
it's the multitude that's answering.
I know. I just, you're channeling it, so I want to make sure you're good.
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks.
Okay. Um, okay. The multitude once told me that the narrative around P. Diddy being involved in dark magic was a cover up for something else. That's another thing that, these algorithms keep producing, that he's involved in dark magic, and like the people he manages, like the Super Bowl is like a ritual, or I don't know. This is what they said, right?
Yeah,
And I think that,
probably a lot of that is distributed by bots and somebody gets it and then it just sends it out. More
yeah,
bots.
that's what it feels like.
Mhm.
So just to kind of like set the record straight. But they did, when the last time I asked, which I think was off camera,
Right.
the multitude once told me that that narrative was a cover up for something else. What is that narrative covering up, and what is true about what's going on there?
It is important to understand many things are being covered up, and there are those things that will be revealed and those things that cannot be revealed, as there are those in power that it's like they will lose all power if it is that the information gets out, and they are not interested in losing power. It is important to understand that black magic is black magic. And if it is that one is interested in learning black magic, one will allow oneself either to allow a positive outlook or a negative outlook. And when one moves forward in that realm of being, one can use the magic in a myriad of ways. We can tell you when one insists that another is using black magic, it is usually based on one's own perception of self. If one believes that black magic is necessary for a cover-up, one is it's like unable to connect with one's knowing, one's own being, and one's own sense of self. When one is able to move forward, one does. The black magic, so to speak, is one's own perception of how one moves forward on the earth plane. If one decides that it cannot be seen in a positive manner, one will spin it in order to be seen in a negative manner. Therefore, one may choose to call the negative manner black magic. However, we can tell you that he and his handlers, so to speak, are not very accurate in their knowing. They're not very accurate in their understanding of being, and they're not very accurate in portraying others in a positive light. Therefore, they choose the negative light. Therefore, they allow themselves to put it out there, so to speak, in such a way as to dismantle or disempower another based on their own perceptions of themselves, as when one wishes to disempower another, it is that one is feeling disempowered. Do not be concerned.
Bully's bully.
Yeah, bullies, bully. Yeah.
Okay. So then is it true that there are organized, call it dark activities and intentions at play among world leaders, elites, and celebrities where children are harmed in mass quantities? This is what some of these algorithms are claiming.
It is important to understand there are always such negativities in process. However, it is also important to understand that it's like it's like not the gravity, but it's not as big as those things would make it out to be. There are those who are performing those negative atrocities. However, it is minor in comparison to the world sense of self. When one is able to move oneself forward, one does. And when it is that one in the higher echelons of, it's not of being, it's the higher echelons of political backgrounds, one might say, that type of power, then that is what makes them feel empowered when basically they are unempowered. Do not be concerned.
Okay. What can we expect in the way of contracted outcomes for the P. Diddy trials?
It is important to understand each one has the obligation to make up each one's own mind. And if it is that each one in that case allows themselves to be open-minded, each one will find what is right for them. And what's in my mind is the jury in this case.
Yeah, I was thinking that too.
We can tell you that each one on that jury is quite open and quite unable to it's like bring in the information that's being discussed on the media. They have allowed themselves to be distanced from 90% of it. Therefore, they will be able to remain open and allow their objectivity to step in the decision making of this particular information of being. What I got.
Information of being equals trial. I love how
Right.
they have their own language around this.
Mhm.
Okay, that I really didn't have any other questions. I kind of wanted to put some conspiracy to rest, or I don't know, bring it to light if there is. And I feel like,
Hold on.
yeah,
We would like you to understand that there are many conspiracies out there, some having to do with this trial, some having to do with other cases, some having to do with other beings, and some having to do with um, those elite predecessors in power. We can tell you some of them are quite dishonorable indeed, but many of them are quite honorable. So we would highly recommend that you not quite lump them all together in a dishonorable manner, as there are quite a few who are not only discouraged but outraged at this type of behavior and are not interested in moving it forward in a positive way. They are interested in allowing it to dismember itself. Do not be concerned, all is love.
well, I could take that into a million directions, and I can feel our viewers wanting me to ask who and what and when and where, but the multitude doesn't really answer those questions. So I'm
Mhm.
not going to bother.
Well, you can
Um,
ask one and see what they say. Because if they're not going to answer, they'll tell you that.
well, I also want to protect you and I from accusation. So, like, I wouldn't ask about specific,
No, not specifics, but
no. Although there is one narrative going around, right, that talks about So here's something a little bit more specific than this broad.
But
That,
plus, Kelly, this is for entertainment purposes only.
of course,
Okay.
still. So there's one narrative going around that talks about how um, the the rap culture was utilized in order to promote violence so that incarceration rates would go up, and that this was orchestrated by people who invested in private prisons as a means of making profiting off of this cultural influence. So, is there truth to that?
So as you were talking, I was getting it's absolute truth.
Wow.
It is important to understand that there was much misinformation allowed to be processed in order for people to make money, regardless of whether it was prison initiated or mogul initiated. It was initiated with the idea of making money, and the word is greed. We can tell you there is much greed on the earth plane at this moment, and in time it will be dissipated and disseminated. Do not be concerned, all is love.
And will that dissipating and whatever they just said, I can't remember now. Will that be revealed during these P. Diddy trials and, in other words, like brought to justice within this period?
So what I'm seeing is like it's a ladder.
Yeah,
It- It's like on the second rung of the ladder.
yeah,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah. I'm probably at this moment. I know things change all the time.
yeah.
Like, so it is important to understand that there is much to be revealed through and via this trial. However, it is the beginning of the process, and there will be many more prosecutions of being of this type. Do not be concerned.
Will they eventually, and by eventually, I mean in the near human future, let's say within the next 5 years, by 2030, will the highest level of that scheming be revealed and justice be served?
So what I'm getting is that there will be a great deal of it will be revealed. It is important to understand that within that time frame, a great deal of the current structure will be dismantled, as there is no way for it to survive. In our estimation, however, another structure will take process, and some of it will be just as bad, but most of it will not. It will take quite some time for the dissolution of such I was like horrible, which is probably me, such horrible behavior of beings on the earth plane. We can tell you there are those who have come to learn and those who have come to teach. And then there are those who have chosen to learn and teach in such a way. Do not be concerned, all is love.
Gosh, so it feels like you finally get to justice on evil and it just perpetuates.
Yeah.
There will always be evil on this earth.
It is important to understand when one comes to the earth plane, one chooses whether to bring oneself in whole or in part. And if one brings oneself in part, there is that empty space requiring fulfillment in some way. And some choose a positive way. However, most choose a negative way of a learning. On the earth plane, it is construed as negative. However, in the spiritual plane, it is all learning, and it is unimportant if it is a positive or a negative learning experience on the earth plane.
Okay. Did they have any closing message about anything we discussed here today?
It is important to understand that there are many who are interested in the information you are seeking, and many who are open to allowing the dissolution of such behavior. However, we can tell you it will take many, many more in order to allow the energy to expand enough in order to decrease and delete this type of behavior. As when it is that each one is ready to learn, each one does. We can tell you, however, it will become lighter and lighter and lighter in energy. Therefore, when the lightness of the energy reaches a certain point in being, the heaviness of that type of behavior will disband itself, as there will be no support like underneath for it. It is important to understand that as each one allows each oneself to grow, and each one raises each one's own energetic self and energetic being, each one will allow the all that is to step in and allow the energetic of the earth plane to I'm getting dissipate, but also regulate itself in a higher and greater way. Do not be concerned.
All right. I think that's all I really have on that topic.
Okay,
Thanks for channeling, Ginny.
you're welcome.
It was a heavy one, and we're recording at nighttime, so it felt appropriate to do it now.
Yeah. Well,
But
it's like whether or not that I agree or disagree with the subject, it's important to understand that it's the multitude that's answering these questions, and the energy is all the same. Um, Positive, negative, they don't differentiate. It's just information.
yeah, I think they're really good about keeping the messages understanding the topic from the perspective of the soul,
Right.
which is here to learn and grow and experience.
Yeah.
And here in this dense world of 3D living, we label things good and bad because of how it makes us feel. But from a soul perspective, it's just learning, growing, and experiencing. It's expanding the soul through contrast. And
Right. Exactly.
yeah, so doesn't make it feel any better here on the earth plane though.
No, not really.
Yeah.
The only thing we can do is like raise our own energy. Because as we raise our own energy, we allow the energy of the collective to raise as well. So if we focus on allowing our own healing, our own positive being, our own sense of self, and allowing, then we can allow the energy that we send out to the cosmos, one might say, to help each and every other one. And if each one does that, it raises the consciousness and the energy level of the collective and every other one.
Yeah, and I think that combined with praying and asking for healing for those who are suffering through these processes can't help, it can only help, you know?
Right. That's right. So
All right, Jen, thanks for channeling.
you're
Appreciate
welcome.
it. Yeah,
Thanks for giving me the opportunity to channel. It's
yeah.
great.
And thanks to the multitude for their unending wisdom. All
Good. We are most pleased.
right, everyone. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on Self Connection.
Yes. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.